So if you saw one of my more recent videos, I went over one of the most exciting upcoming FPS games called Gray Zone Warfare, which is an open world extraction game with a focus on realism. And this game looks to be legitimate really good. All the gameplay and information we've learned about it points to it being a pretty good game. And I've been pretty excited about the release of this game, which is going to be sometime in 2024. But we have recently gotten some new information that makes me even more excited for this game. Now, most of this new information is focused around what's going to happen in actual matches of this game. Because if you're coming from something like Escape from Tarkov, you'll be used to loading into a match, having to find everybody, then loading into that specific raid, and you'll have upwards of 50 minutes in that raid, and you have to extract before that time ends, and then the match closes. But in Gray Zone Warfare, they're going for a persistent world, which seems to be something more similar to the Cycle, which if you don't know what that was another extraction FPS game. And how their matches work is they basically would just have a bunch of different servers running, and their servers or matches would last for 6 hours. There could be a certain amount of people in every one of those servers. So once you went up to queue for a match, it would just find any of those current servers that are open and instantly put you into a match. And you could stay in for as long as you wanted, or until that server would actually go down and reset and refresh. And one of the biggest upsides to a system like this is that you don't have that massively long queue. Like in Escape from Tarkov, you know you're going to be waiting 5 minutes before you get to actually start playing, because of having to find everybody, then everybody having to load in, and then the match having to start. But with these persistent matches, you basically instantly get put in, because all the matchmaker has to do is find a server with enough slots open for you, and if you're playing with anybody else, and it instantly puts you in. And this can also mean that the fights can generally end up being a bit more varied, because somebody you're fighting against could potentially have been in this match for like an hour. They could be low on resources, they could be bleeding trying to get to an extraction, or you could be in the run for an hour with low resources and have to fight against somebody that just spawned into that match with all new resources, full magazines, and as much healing as they want. Now, I haven't seen any information on how long these persistent worlds are actually going to last, but I would presume they're going to be somewhat similar to the Cycle. They're probably not going to just be up for an infinite amount of time. They're probably going to be up for a large portion of time, maybe like 8 hours or something, and then they basically just reset and reopen. But with these matches even being a few hours long, they basically all feel completely persistent, because in games like this where you have healing, you have food and water, you have ammo to look after, you're probably not going to be staying in matches for hours at a time. You're just not going to have enough resources. But that also brings us to how many different players you could end up seeing in one of these matches, because we got some pretty specific information on this. So the game is going to be both PvE and PvP, and there's going to be 3 different PMC companies which are basically going to work as different factions, and there's going to be 16 players per every one of those companies or factions. So that's 48 potential players in a single match. You're going to be able to have up to 4 players in one squad, so that's up to 3 additional people you group up with and can queue into a match with. The map's going to be 42 kilometers squared, and there's going to be over 1,000 AI enemies on the map at any given time, which is pretty massive. The map is pretty big, but having that much AI and that many players is also pretty exciting, because most other extraction games we've had is something along the lines of Escape from Tarkov. Like I think in EFT, I think the most you can have in a match right now is like 14. And even with that, there's still a bunch of technical issues, which I think is one of the biggest issues with Tarkov. But with this game being built on Unreal Engine 5, it seems they're building this game with the tech so you can have a lot more people in these matches, including a lot more AI entities. But that also brings us to the 3 different companies or factions, because we don't actually know how this is going to work. Because how this was explained by one of the developers in a reply is that there's going to be these 3 different private military companies, 16 people in each, but you can squad up with 4 different people. Now, we don't know if these different companies or factions are going to be allied with each other. Like if you go to, say, MMOs, which some of these developers seem to be inspired by, if you have different factions, you're on the same side. Like if you go to, say, World of Warcraft, if you're Alliance, you're not going to be in the open world fighting other Alliance. You're going to be fighting Horde, which is a different faction. So that could potentially be what this is. There's 3 different factions, so you could potentially have a total of 16 allies in a match at a time. So maybe you come across PMCs of your faction, maybe there'll be some UI element or something where where you guys know you're allied with each other, or it could be something like Escape from Tarkov that has bears and USECs, where there's bears and USECs, there's two different factions, but it really doesn't matter once you're in the game. You're still going to fight every USEC and every bear, and there's nothing additional to like allow them to group up in any way or be allies. So it could go either way, but this amount of players is pretty incredible. And I'm also assuming that these 3 different companies or factions outside of the actual match are probably going to have some additional things, like maybe you'll have different starter gear like in Escape from Tarkov. You'll probably pick up different objectives or tasks or quests, whatever they're calling them. You'll probably have different ones depending on your faction. Maybe you'll get some different type of currency, or maybe you'll get discounts on certain weaponry based around your company. So there's a bunch of different things that could apply to a system like this, but either way, having this many players in an extraction game with a persistent server is incredibly exciting. And I would definitely recommend checking out my last video on this game because I go over a lot of the more basic information that we've learned about the game, but this is one of the FPSs I'm most excited for. This is something I've wanted in an extraction shooter since Escape from Tarkov was originally revealed and kind of touted as an open world extraction game like that. This is definitely a game I want. And I think it's different enough from Escape from Tarkov, being open world, being in a very different setting, to be a new, unique experience that's still in that extraction shooter genre, that's giving a lot of the elements that everybody wants with all the weapon customization, the more realistic combat, all the looting, and high stakes gameplay. But that's pretty much all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.